I'm Tim Selwood. I am now an ambassador for the Trust. We had a family company, Selwoods, contractors, plant engineers. My brother and I, we both went into the company. By that time I was a lawyer, expecting to deal with the legal affairs. My father, though, died at the age of 56, and because he was in control of a family company, in those days he came in for 80% death duty, so we then had to sell the company. From that, I had a share, and that went to buy Fuzzy Gardens. My brother was a brilliant engineer. He had a deep social conscience. He was a Quaker. He had a love of his Welsh roots, as I do. We had a radical Welsh background. So he was a really, truly wonderful person. He took me to see Martin Luther King preach. Those sort of things we did together. So he had started flying, he had his own aircraft, and he was going on a business trip to the west coast of Wales with a co-director. And flying back from the west coast, they came on unexpected harsh weather over the tops of the hills around Swansea and Neath, and trying to get clear below cloud level, came up against the power lines that run along the tops of the hills, and had to do an avoiding action which resulted in the plane stalling and coming down in the forest. So the plane was lost. It didn't come home. Didn't come home the next day, and I got on to the RAF, and we got an aircraft out searching all along the route where he'd been. And eventually the tailplane was seen sticking up out of the trees at Neath in Margam Park, where my father was born. It was such a strange thing to happen. We'd insured each other's lives for a lot of money against a possible second death duty claim, and so we'd only been paying the premium for a few months. The insurance company weren't very keen to pay it out, but they actually refused because they said he hadn't declared he was flying. And so we had a wonderful insurance broker, worked from the top of his garage not far from here. And he went through his papers and he rang me up and said, "I've just found a note of a telephone conversation written on a scrap of paper with the insurers. It just says, Mr. Peter flying." Those 3 words. And on that they paid out. And on such small things, great events can hang. So his propeller is outside here in the grounds. There's a reminder that also out of tragedy, great things can grow. I think he would be very pleased now to see how much was started in his name. Where we're sitting, Minstead Lodge, is really the headquarters. And that goes back to 1975, and what's grown up from that are some social enterprises, one of which is Fuzzy Gardens. We have an arts centre, Hanger Farm, which is in Totton, and we have premises in Portsmouth, where the Trust has been a trailblazer in getting people out of an institutional frame of mind and into the community. We have drop-in centres around the area, and also supported tenancies in the town where people get support for their lives, varying on what their needs are, and again, integrating them well into the community.
I've always been interested in plants, ever since I could walk, I suppose. Furzy is a great asset. There is such a breadth of opportunities there. The delight of horticultural therapy and working at Furzy is that it brings the two together. It's people and it's plants.
I still have an indelible memory of severely learning disabled people eating out of dustbins in a yard which I was working in, basically scrounging out of dustbins. And even now, over 50 years later, I can still see it quite clearly, that picture of these people. I'd recognise their faces now, I think, after all that time.
Actually, people are still as distanced. Sometimes they'll walk on the other side of the street to avoid you. Sometimes they will just look at you strangely. And if that's what you experience, then that hurts. We like them to say it, but we don't want to hear it in society. We don't want to hear that they're lonely and that the problem is not here. The problem is that when you go out from here and you've got expectations that people will engage with you and be responsive to you because that's what people are, that actually people are still as distanced.
Some nice canes here.
People think they're not going to experience brokenness. They had their life planned out, their education, their marriage, and they don't sometimes experience brokenness till later in life, sometimes very late in life. But everyone is going to experience brokenness. And in discovering that, you really discover the value of sharing life with others, not independence, but interdependence. It's not to do with material success, it's to do with a deeper kind of success. Not living for oneself, but trying to live for others. Not living for gain, but living to give. All these are very simple rules, but they're all to do with sharing our vulnerability and understanding our own brokenness. In that way, we can relate to other people and not only help them, but receive from them. We devised a fairly broad idea of what we wanted to do, but no sooner we got started than it became apparent that it was not going to be just down to these ideas, because need overtook ideology. I mean, the first person who turned up at the door was somebody who didn't fit any of our criteria at all and was just in need. And in fact, he stayed. While he was here during that first week, the panelling in the library caught fire. And if he was the only one in the house, and if he hadn't been here, we would have lost the house anyway. And I sometimes think, oh, there was a real message in there, certainly for me and for others.
Our motivations were different from the motivations of the statutory organisations. We were embracing the differences that the people we worked with came with and celebrating their abilities. We defended our right to be different.
And it's grown exponentially, so at each stage of the growth, it's happened naturally, and in one way, not a surprise, in the other, extraordinary, absolutely extraordinary. In 1986, Martin Lennox came to us. Martin had been a Cistercian monk, and he was deeply committed. And he started the horticultural project at Furzy Gardens.
I didn't have a particular plan. We were offered a field, a shed and a minibus, and it was basically a day service.
He was responsible for the growth here from community to a deeply caring and professionalised organisation for advancing the needs of learning disabled people.
In 1989, we'd taken our service users on a self-catering holiday to Cornwall, and it made me realise just how much more they needed to learn about self-care, care of house and home, not just about horticulture and work skills. And Tim said, well, you know, there's some space in Minstead Lodge. Have you thought about going residential? And so that was the next stage.
So many people we've seen live and die. So many people we've come to know and to love. So many people who've taken a lead role in who we are and stuck with it. It's people all the way, it is.
Minstead Lodge, what was your Thursday garden?
Depends on this. You know, when we first started, we had a forge up in the courtyard doing metalwork.
Right, chaps. They're going to get let out at some point.
Yes, I think Tim, the person who started it all off, was a key element. Because there was always this freedom. You know, although Tim was always there to oversee, he was always there, as it were, to serve.
How do you start it, David? Yeah. That. Great.
He always was there to encourage, come up with answers if he had a problem.
Here was also a relationship between the natural world, if you like, the gardening, flowers, trees, a whole host of things that grow around us, and that human beings flower best when they are in good soil that you tend and nurture. And this was true, especially true for those with learning disability.
Again, that's starting to go a bit, isn't it?
I felt it very important that I take a personal involvement in their lives. And one of the things I learned through doing that is that it's not the distance travelled. It was more about how they got there. Someone might have only travelled in the eyes of the world a very short distance, but for them, that was a mammoth gain. Well, it taught me, certainly, how to value what people can achieve.
We cannot force change in our world, but we can invite it.
Dignity, mutual respect, kindness, generosity. These are the things that give the value, particularly mutual respect. For somebody who so much of the world doesn't value, to cherish that, to cherish them, to value them, to give them that respect. I'm a bit of a mother hen, and I suppose I don't have any formal role now, and I haven't for some time. And that's good. But I still feel I'd like to put my wings out a little bit and protect what's going on.